Good evening. Today, the United States informed us they will be imposing 25% tariffs on Canadian exports to the United States.
President Donald Trump made a significant decision in 2025 that altered trade between the U.S. and Canada. He claimed that he was concerned about people crossing the border illegally and about the dangerous drug fentanyl entering the U.S., which is why the U.S. would impose a 25% tariff on everything purchased from Canada. However, many people believe that these claims are illogical, as the majority of fentanyl enters the country through Mexico, not Canada. When Trump joked that Canada should become the 51st U.S. state to avoid the tariffs, Canada's leaders were furious and declared that their country was not for sale. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more updates. In 2023, the U.S. purchased $482 billion worth of goods from Canada, including food, oil, and automobiles, while Canada purchased $441 billion worth of goods from the U.S. This indicates that the U.S. spent $41 billion more on Canadian goods than Canada did on American goods. Trump believes that this is unfair and wants to use tariffs to correct it. But experts say that trade deficits are common when nations that are close neighbors cooperate frequently. Let's talk about Oilverse. Canada gives the US 60% of its oil, which is equivalent to giving a friend 60 out of 100 chocolate bars. If the US imposes tariffs on Canadian oil, gas prices in America could increase by 50 cents per gallon. Just think of how unhappy people would be if a candy bar suddenly cost 50 cents more. Cars are another major issue, so Canada's leaders warned that they might stop exporting so much oil to the US and instead sell it to Asian nations. For instance, parts for a Ford F-150 truck cross the border 8 times before the truck is completed, meaning that half of all auto parts used in the US are imported from Canada. If tariffs increase the cost of these parts, a truck that once cost $30,000 could now cost $32,500. Companies like General Motors stated that this could result in the loss of 150,000 American jobs, since the cost of producing cars would increase. Food is also impacted because the U.S. imports $3 billion worth of beef from Canada annually. If tariffs increase the price of Canadian beef, a $5 hamburger could now cost $6. In retaliation, Canada says it will raise prices for goods the U.S. sells them, such as Florida orange juice, Wisconsin cheese, and Michigan dishwashers. This implies that Canadian orange juice prices may rise and Wisconsin farmers may experience financial losses as a result of Canadians ceasing to purchase their cheese. Canada is not remaining silent. They announced that they would charge TS $37 billion worth of American goods, choosing items like Wisconsin cheese and Florida oranges that harm states where Trump has a large following. Leaders in Canada want Americans to endure the suffering, in the hopes that Trump will reconsider. There is also a significant rule known as the USMCA, which governs trade between the US, Canada, and Mexico, which states that nations cannot simply raise tariffs without a valid reason. One Canadian leader even stated that if the US doesn't want our oil, they will sell it to Asia, which could cause gas prices in the US to rise even further because America would have to purchase oil from countries farther away, like Saudi Arabia. Canada claims that Trump is violating this rule and plans to sue him. Should Canada prevail, the US may have to halt the tariffs, but this could take a while, and in the meantime, prices continue to rise. Other nations are joining in as well. Germany and the EU have stated that they support Canada and may raise the price of American jeans or motorcycles. Mexico, a country in the United States. According to NCA2, they could cease supplying avocados to the US, which would raise the cost of guacamole. Additionally, Canada is making new friends and wants to sell more goods to Asian nations like Japan and India. For instance, Canada sells a lot of farming-related PODH to India. If it sells more to Asia, the US may no longer be Canada's top trading partner. When the United States decides to raise the price of goods purchased from Canada, Canada did not remain silent. Instead, they devised a strategy to retaliate. To increase costs, they imported certain items from the US, such as Florida orange juice. Florida provides 40% of Canada's orange juice, so if the country raises the price of Florida oranges, the farmers there might lose $300 million. Florida's orange growers are concerned that if you had a lemonade stand and your friend said, "I'll only buy your lemonade if you pay me extra," you might not sell as much lemonade, isn't that right? Another significant move that Canada may take is to sever ties with Boeing. The biggest threat facing Canada is oil. Canada supplies 20% of the oil used by the US, so if Canada stopped sending that oil, the US would have to buy it from countries like Saudi Arabia or Venezuela, which would drive up gas prices everywhere. There was a dispute with Boeing in 2017 when Canada's aircraft company Bombardier was selling planes, but Boeing claimed it was unfair. Now, Canada might say, we won't buy Boeing airplanes anymore. Similar to this, you must purchase it from another restaurant if your preferred dish is sold out. There is a special agreement called the USMCA between the US, Canada, and Mexico, wherein they all agreed to trade fairly. Canada claims that the US is breaking this promise by imposing tariffs without a valid reason. Our two goals were the same. First, to work on preventing tariffs, and second, to work on our response when it comes to our trade relationship. Of course, we know that the USA has a surplus with us if we don't take into account our energy exports, which are driven by the USA demand. The US imposed steel tariffs in 2018, and Canada retaliated by raising prices for items like ketchup and whiskey. This time, Canada could impose up to $110 billion on US goods, and other nations are watching the battle. Canada's trade minister declared that we'll take the US to court and prevail. Mexico, a party to the USMCA too, stated that perhaps we should stop shipping avocados to Texas since Germany, a member of the EU, stated that they might raise the price of American motorcycles like Harley-Davidson because they support Canada. For you, what does this mean? Living in the US may result in higher gas, food, and vehicle prices. Living in Canada may result in higher prices for things like orange juice and dishwashers, but both nations are at odds with one another, and it's like a losing battle. Economics experts warn that this could spark a trade war in which nations raise tariffs repeatedly. Trump claims he wants to support America by keeping money and jobs in the country, but some fear that tariffs will have the opposite effect, driving up prices, hurting businesses, and possibly displacing workers. The US and Canada have been friends for a long time, but now they are at odds with one another. The US has a trade surplus of about $60 billion with us, which includes goods and services. We are the largest export market for 36 US states, and we are still the largest customer to the US, so Canada is the biggest customer. The world is watching to see if they can resolve their issues, and perhaps one day they will shake hands and say, "Let's share nicely again."